What if I told you there are places on this earth where entire cities once thrived, grand metropolises filled with life, trade, and culture, only to vanish without a trace? Not destroyed by war or disaster, but simply lost to time, swallowed by jungles, buried beneath deserts, or hidden under layers of myth and legend. These aren't just ruins, they're frozen moments of history, waiting to whisper their secrets to those who dare to listen. Think about that for a second. Somewhere out there, right now, stone walls stand draped in vines, temples sleep under centuries of dust, and treasures linger untouched, all because humanity forgot where they were. That's the irresistible pull of lost cities. They're not just relics of the past, they're invitations to adventure, puzzles begging to be solved. Every one of them holds a story of rise and fall, of glory and oblivion. Maybe it's a kingdom that grew too proud and collapsed under its own weight, or a trading hub that faded when the rivers changed course. Perhaps it's a city so remote that the modern world simply passed it by, leaving it preserved like a time capsule. And here's the haunting truth: we don't even know how many are still out there. For every Atlantis or El Dorado that captures our imagination, there are dozens more with no name at all, just fragments of pottery or a line in an ancient text hinting at their existence. Today, we're setting out to uncover 30 of these forgotten places, 30 echoes of civilizations that once shaped the world. Some you might recognize from legends, others will feel like uncovering a secret for the very first time. From the sunken streets of a Mediterranean port to a jungle-shrouded citadel where the stones still hum with old magic, each of these lost cities has a tale that defies belief. And the most thrilling part, many of them are still out there waiting to be found. So if you've ever dreamed of stepping off the map, of following in the footsteps of explorers who dared to ask, what if? You're in the right place. This isn't just history, it's a treasure hunt across centuries, and the next great discovery could be just around the corner. The name alone sends shivers down the spine of every explorer. Atlantis. No lost city has captured our collective imagination quite like this legendary metropolis, first described by the Greek philosopher Plato over 2,300 years ago. According to his writings, Atlantis was a naval power unlike any other, an island kingdom with advanced technology, towering structures, and untold wealth. But in a single day and night of catastrophe, the entire civilization sank beneath the waves, vanishing forever. Plato claimed this wasn't just a story, but a historical account passed down through generations. So where does legend end and truth begin? Over the centuries, countless theories have placed Atlantis everywhere from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean. Some believe it was a real place, perhaps the volcanic island of Santorini, devastated by a massive eruption around 1600 BCE. Others argue it was a metaphor for Plato's warnings about the dangers of hubris, a morality tale disguised as history. Then there are the more outlandish suggestions that Atlantis was home to an alien civilization or a lost super race with knowledge far beyond our own. But here's what makes Atlantis so endlessly fascinating. Despite all our technology, despite centuries of searching, we still don't have definitive proof it ever existed. Modern expeditions have turned up tantalizing clues: underwater ruins off the coast of Spain, strange geometric patterns near the Azores, even submerged structures in the Bahamas that some claim match Plato's descriptions. Yet none have been universally accepted as the real Atlantis. Maybe that's why the legend endures. It's not just about finding a city, it's about the possibility that our history is far grander and more mysterious than we ever imagined. Atlantis represents the ultimate what if, a ghost of a civilization that, real or not, continues to haunt our dreams of discovery. If Atlantis is the ocean's great mystery, then El Dorado is its glittering counterpart, a legend born not of water but of gold. Unlike a single sunken city, El Dorado began as something far more elusive, not a place but a person. The name itself means the golden one in Spanish, and it traces back to a Muisca tribal ritual in what's now Colombia. When a new chief rose to power, his body would be covered in gold dust before he dove into Lake Guatavita, offering treasures to the gods. Over time, this ceremony warped into a different story, a city paved with gold, hidden deep in the Amazon where wealth flowed like rivers. Conquistadors, starving for treasure after plundering the Aztec and Inca empires, became obsessed with finding it. Stories spread of a king who powdered himself in gold each morning and washed it off in a sacred lake by night. Expeditions launched into the jungle, each more desperate than the last. Gonzalo Pizarro led 600 men and thousands of enslaved indigenous people into the rainforest, only to emerge years later with a handful of survivors, empty-handed and broken. Sir Walter Raleigh searched twice, even publishing wild accounts to lure English investors, yet found nothing but fever and failure. But here's the twist: El Dorado wasn't entirely a myth. In recent decades, archaeologists uncovered evidence of the Muisca's gold rituals, including exquisite votive offerings in Lake Guatavita. And in 2010, laser mapping revealed vast, ancient settlements in the Bolivian Amazon, proof of complex civilizations that could have inspired the legends. The real tragedy: the conquistadors passed right over these thriving cultures, too blinded by greed to see the truth. El Dorado endures because it's more than a lost city, it's a mirror. For some, it represents the intoxicating allure of the unknown. For others, it's a cautionary tale about destruction in pursuit of wealth. Even today, treasure hunters scour satellite images, convinced they'll find golden towers beneath the canopy. But perhaps the greatest treasure wasn't gold at all. It was the thriving societies Europeans ignored in their mad dash for myth. Pompeii wasn't just lost, it was frozen in time by one of history's most devastating natural disasters. On August 24, 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupted with unimaginable force, sending a column of superheated ash and pumice 9 miles into the sky. Within hours, the bustling Roman city was buried under 20 feet of volcanic debris, its people and buildings preserved like insects in amber. Unlike other lost cities that faded slowly, Pompeii's end was sudden and apocalyptic, a snapshot of ordinary life violently interrupted. What makes Pompeii extraordinary isn't just its destruction, but its resurrection. For nearly 1,700 years, it lay forgotten until workers digging a canal in 1748 struck ancient walls. Excavations revealed streets where bakery ovens still held loaves of bread, taverns with wine stains on the counters, and homes with intricate mosaics untouched by time. Even more haunting were the plaster casts of victims, their bodies forever captured in their final moments, a man shielding his face, a woman clutching her jewelry, a dog writhing in agony. These weren't just artifacts, they were human stories preserved in heartbreaking detail. Archaeologically, Pompeii is a gold mine. Unlike Rome, where later civilizations built over the past, Pompeii's burial sealed an intact cross-section of Roman life. Graffiti on tavern walls reveals political gossip and crude jokes. Fish sauce factories and brothels show the vibrancy of commerce. Even the ruts in stone roads, worn by centuries of cartwheels, tell us about daily traffic patterns. The city's layout, with its public baths, amphitheater, and wealthy villas, paints a vivid picture of social hierarchy. But perhaps Pompeii's greatest lesson is its eerie familiarity. The people here weren't so different from us. They dined on street food, cheered at gladiator matches, and complained about taxes. When Vesuvius erupted, many ignored the warning signs, assuming they had time to escape. That hubris cost thousands their lives. Today, as scientists monitor Vesuvius, which remains active, Pompeii stands as both a monument and a warning, a reminder that nature's fury can rewrite history in a single day. High in the Andes, where the clouds cling to mountain peaks like whispers, sits a city that defies explanation, Machu Picchu. This Inca citadel, built around 1450 at the dizzying height of nearly 8,000 feet, wasn't just a settlement, it was a masterpiece of engineering, spirituality, and sheer ambition. Imagine stone structures fitted together without mortar, so precise that not even a razor blade can slip between the rocks. Terraces carved into near vertical slopes, defying landslides and feeding thousands. And all of it constructed without the wheel, iron tools, or draft animals. How? That's the mystery that clings to these walls like the morning mist. For centuries, Machu Picchu existed only in local Quechua lore until a young American explorer, Hiram Bingham, stumbled upon it in 1911. Even then, it was almost mist. The jungle had reclaimed it, vines swallowing temples and staircases whole. Bingham was actually searching for Vilcabamba, the last refuge of the Incas from Spanish conquistadors. Instead, he found something far more extraordinary, a city frozen in time, untouched by European hands. But why was it built here on this impractical, inaccessible ridge? Some say it was a royal estate for the Inca Emperor Pachacuti, a summer retreat of sorts. Others argue it was a sacred religious site, its alignment with solstices and mountains suggesting deep cosmic significance. The Teotihuacán stone, a ritual pillar translating to hitching post of the sun, hints at ceremonies to tie the sun to the earth during winter's darkest days. And then there are the theories about astronomical observation or even a hidden refuge for elite priestesses. Yet the greatest puzzle isn't how Machu Picchu was built, it's why it was abandoned. The Spanish never found it, and there's no evidence of violent conflict. The leading theory, a smallpox epidemic brought by Europeans, may have decimated its caretakers decades before the conquistadors arrived. Without workers to maintain the terraces and channels, the jungle crept back in, swallowing the city until it became legend. Today, Machu Picchu stands as a testament to human ingenuity and humility. The stones seem to whisper that even the grandest civilizations are fleeting, that nature always has the final word. Walking its paths, you can't help but wonder, if the Incas could create this without the technology we take for granted, what else might they have achieved? And what other marvels still lie hidden, waiting for their stories to be rediscovered? Carved into the rose-red cliffs of southern Jordan, Petra isn't just a city, it's a mirage-made stone. For over 2,000 years, wind and water sculpted these canyon walls into a masterpiece of human ambition, where entire temples and palaces were chiseled from the living rock. This wasn't just a settlement, it was the beating heart of the Nabatean kingdom, a civilization that turned desert silence into a symphony of trade. Picture camel caravans heavy with spices from Arabia, silks from China, and incense from Somalia, all funneling through Petra's narrow Sikh, a winding gorge that served as both gateway and fortress. The Nabateans didn't just survive in this harsh landscape. They thrived, engineering ingenious water channels to transform arid cliffs into an oasis of wealth and power. The crown jewel of Petra is Al-Khosne, the treasury, its intricate facade glowing like embers at dawn. But here's the twist: despite its name, this wasn't a vault for gold. Archaeologists believe it was a mausoleum, perhaps for a king, its towering columns and mythical figures whispering of a culture that worshipped gods of stone and sky. The city's true riches came from trade, with the Nabateans controlling caravan routes like puppet strings, taxing merchants who had no choice but to pass through their domain. At its peak, Petra was a melting pot of languages, religions, and ideas, a desert Dubai of the ancient world. Then, like so many lost cities, Petra faded. The Romans annexed it in 106 CE, rerouting trade by sea and starving the city of its lifeblood. Earthquakes crumbled its aqueducts, and by the 7th century it was abandoned, known only to local Bedouin tribes. For centuries, the West dismissed Petra as legend until Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt disguised himself as a pilgrim in 1812 and became the first European to lay eyes on it in over 1,000 years. Today, Petra's fame is undeniable. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the star of films like Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, where the treasury's dramatic reveal cemented its place in pop culture. Yet no camera can capture the awe of standing in that canyon, tracing fingers over carvings worn smooth by time. The real magic isn't just in Petra's grandeur, but in its resilience, a city that refused to vanish, waiting patiently for the world to remember. Deep in the jungles of Cambodia, a city of gods and kings rises from the green embrace of the wilderness Angkor, the once mighty heart of the Khmer Empire. At its peak between the 9th and 15th centuries, this wasn't just a city, it was the largest pre-industrial urban complex on Earth, spanning over 400 square miles, larger than modern-day Los Angeles. Its crown jewel, Angkor Wat, stretches across 500 acres, a temple so vast it could fit nearly 400 football fields within its moat. But what's truly staggering isn't just its size, it's the audacity of its vision. Built in the 12th century by King Suryavarman II, Angkor Wat was designed as an earthly replica of the Hindu cosmos, with its 5 towers symbolizing Mount Meru, the sacred home of the gods. Every carving, every corridor was a prayer in stone. Yet Angkor was more than just one temple. It was a hydraulic marvel, a city tamed by water. The Khmer engineers constructed an elaborate network of canals, reservoirs, and moats, some stretching miles long to harness the monsoon rains. The West Barre, a man-made reservoir, held over 50 billion gallons of water, feeding rice paddies that sustained a population of up to 1 million people. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was a lifeline, turning seasonal floods into a controlled force that powered an empire. So how does a city this grand vanish? The answer lies in the very element that sustained it. Recent studies of tree rings suggest that prolonged droughts in the 14th century, followed by extreme monsoons, crippled Angkor's delicate water systems. Canals silted up, reservoirs overflowed, and the once meticulous balance between nature and engineering collapsed. By the time the Siamese armies sacked Angkor in 1431, the city was already a shadow of itself. The jungle moved in, wrapping its roots around temples like Ta Prohm, where stone and tree now fuse in an inseparable embrace. But here's the twist: Angkor never truly disappeared. Local monks maintained Angkor Wat as a Buddhist shrine, and European explorers in the 19th century were stunned to find peasants living among the ruins, their daily lives woven into the ancient stones. Today, laser scans reveal even grander secrets: hidden cities beneath the forest canopy, evidence that Angkor's sprawl was far greater than we ever imagined. Angkor's legacy is a paradox. It stands as both a triumph of human ambition and a humbling lesson in our fragility. The Khmer built monuments to outlast eternity, yet their greatest vulnerability wasn't invasion, it was the environment they so meticulously engineered. Walking through these ruins, you can't help but wonder, if a civilization this advanced could falter, what does that mean for our own cities, our own balancing act with nature? The stones of Angkor don't just whisper of the past, they echo a warning for the future. For 3,000 years, Troy existed in 2 places at once, etched into the pages of Homer's Iliad as the backdrop of the Trojan War, and hidden somewhere beneath the soil of modern Turkey, waiting to be unearthed. The city of Priam and Hector, of Helen's beauty and the Trojan horse's treachery, was long dismissed as pure myth, a poet's invention. That is, until a brash, treasure-obsessed German businessman named Heinrich Schliemann arrived in the late 19th century, armed with a dog-eared copy of Homer and a stubborn belief that legends could be real. Schliemann's methods were reckless by today's standards. He dynamited through layers of ancient settlement at Hisarlik, a site in northwestern Turkey, in his haste to reach what he called Priam's treasure. And yet, against all odds, he found something extraordinary. Not just one city, but 9 stacked like a layered cake, each built atop the ruins of the last. The charred walls, arrowheads, and evidence of violent destruction in Troy matched Homer's description so eerily that even skeptics paused. Had Schliemann actually uncovered the setting of the Trojan War? The debate still rages. Archaeologists now know Troy was a real, thriving metropolis for millennia, controlling vital trade routes between the Aegean and Black Seas. The city's wealth came from taxing ships waiting for favorable winds to pass the Dardanelles, a choke point so strategically valuable that conflict was inevitable. But was there really a 10-year war over Helen, or did Homer's epic weave together centuries of skirmishes into one timeless tale? Some clues suggest a kernel of truth. Hittite tablets mention a rival city called Wilusa, likely Troy, and speak of tensions with the Greeks. The Trojan War may have been a protracted trade dispute, exaggerated over generations into a clash of heroes. As for the famous horse, it could have been a metaphor for siege engines or even an earthquake. Poseidon, god of horses, was also the shaker of the earth. Troy's legacy is a puzzle wrapped in poetry. Schliemann's treasure hunt, for all its flaws, forced the world to confront a startling idea that buried beneath our oldest stories might be real places, real people, and real wars waiting for someone to listen. Today, the ruins whisper not just of Achilles' rage, but of something deeper: the human need to turn history into legend, and then, just maybe, back again. Picture a city so wealthy, so powerful, that its very name became synonymous with luxury and decadence in the ancient world: Carthage. Founded by Phoenician traders in the 9th century BCE on the coast of modern-day Tunisia, this wasn't just a settlement. It was the beating heart of a maritime empire that stretched from North Africa to Spain, Sicily, and beyond. The Carthaginians didn't just dominate trade, they invented it, mastering the art of navigation and commerce to build a network that would make any modern globalist envious. Their ships, laden with Tyrian purple dye, Spanish silver, and African ivory, turned the Mediterranean into their private marketplace. But Carthage's greatest strength, its ambition, would also spell its doom. The city's rivalry with Rome wasn't just about territory, it was a clash of civilizations. The Romans saw themselves as disciplined farmers and soldiers, while Carthage embodied the cunning and wealth of seafarers. This tension exploded into 3 brutal conflicts known as the Punic Wars, where history pivoted on moments of genius and madness. Take Hannibal's audacious crossing of the Alps with war elephants in 2018 BCE, a move so unexpected it became the ancient equivalent of a tactical nuclear strike. For 15 years, his army rampaged through Italy, undefeated in battle yet unable to land a killing blow. Rome's response was equally staggering. In a show of sheer determination, they rebuilt their fleet from scratch after multiple defeats, adopting and improving Carthaginian ship designs until they controlled the seas. The final war was less a fight than a slaughter. In 146 BC, after a 3-year siege, Roman legions broke through Carthage's walls. The city burned for 17 days, civilists were sold into slavery, the ground was sown with salt to ensure nothing would grow, and an entire civilization was erased from the map, or so Rome thought. Yet Carthage refused to stay buried. Julius Caesar later rebuilt it as a Roman colony, and today its ruins near Tunis whisper of layered histories. The ancient harbor, once a circular fortress for 200 warships, is now a quiet lagoon. The Tophet, a sanctuary where archaeologists uncovered urns of sacrificed children, a grim practice debated by scholars, sits uneasily beside Roman villas with mosaic floors. Even the name lingers. Carthago delenda isti, Carthage must be destroyed, became a Roman mantra, a warning against hubris that echoes eerily in our own age of empire. What makes Carthage unforgettable isn't just its tragic end, but its afterlife. The city became a ghost haunting Rome's conscience, a symbol of the price of absolute victory. And in a twist of irony, it was Carthage's obliteration that cemented its legend, proof that some cities never truly die, even when their stones are scattered and their stories rewritten by the victors. Rising from the dust of Mesopotamia like a mirage of power and excess, Babylon was a city that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. At its zenith under King Nebuchadnezzar II in the 6th century BC, this was more than a capital. It was a statement carved in brick and gold, a declaration that humanity could touch the divine. The Ishtar Gate, with its gleaming blue tiles and procession of lions and dragons, wasn't just an entrance, it was a portal to a world where gods walked among men. The city's walls, so thick 2 chariots could race atop them, weren't merely defenses, they were the physical embodiment of invincibility. And then there were the Hanging Gardens, a wonder so sublime that ancient writers like Strabo and Diodorus Siculus struggled to believe they could exist at all. Imagine terraces of exotic plants cascading 50 feet into the air, irrigated by a labyrinth of pipes and screws drawing water from the Euphrates, an engineering marvel in a land where rain was scarcer than mercy. But Babylon's true power wasn't just in its stones, it was in its stories. This was the city that cast the Jews into exile, immortalized in the Psalms as they wept by its rivers, longing for Zion. It was the backdrop of biblical prophecies where Daniel deciphered the writing on the wall and the Tower of Babel became a cautionary tale of human arrogance. Nebuchadnezzar himself, after conquering Jerusalem, descended into madness according to the book of Daniel, eating grass like an ox, a humbling reminder that even the mightiest rulers were subject to forces beyond their control. Yet for all its glory, Babylon's decline was as dramatic as its rise. When Cyrus the Great of Persia marched through its gates in 539 BC, he didn't need to lay siege. Legend says the city's own priests, disillusioned with their king's weakness, opened the gates willingly. The conqueror became a liberator, freeing the Jewish captives and allowing them to return home. Under Persian and later Greek rule, Babylon slowly faded, its ziggurats crumbling into the very earth they once dominated. Today, the ruins near modern Baghdad whisper of a paradox, a city synonymous with both human achievement and divine reckoning. Archaeologists still debate whether the Hanging Gardens were here or in Nineveh, whether the Tower of Babel was myth or a real ziggurat. But perhaps that's the point. Babylon endures not because we can prove every brick of its legend, but because it represents something eternal, the dizzying heights we can reach and the inevitable fall that follows when we forget our place in the cosmos. Walking through its remnants, you can almost hear the echoes of Nebuchadnezzar's boasts and the quiet, persistent voice of history asking, "What have we learned?" Deep in the emerald heart of Guatemala's Patane rainforest, a skyline of stone pierces the canopy Tikal, one of the greatest cities the Maya ever built. This wasn't just a settlement, it was a cosmic engine where pyramids doubled as sacred mountains, staircases became portals to the underworld, and every building aligned with the stars. At its peak around 700 CE, Tikal's influence stretched across the Maya world, its rulers commanding trade routes in jade, obsidian, and cocoa beans. But what's truly staggering isn't just its scale, it's the precision of its design. The Grand Plaza, flanked by Temple 1 and Temple 2, forms a celestial mirror. When the sun sets during the equinoxes, shadows slither down the steps like serpents, a deliberate echo of the feathered serpent god Kukulkan. The genius of Tikal lies in its adaptation. Unlike desert cities that relied on rivers, the Maya here mastered a landscape that should have been hostile. They built reservoirs to capture rainwater, creating a network so efficient it sustained a population of up to 100,000 at its height. Their palaces weren't just homes, they were political theaters where kings staged elaborate spectacles of power, like the infamous Star War campaigns against rival city Calakmul. Inscriptions on stelae tell of dynasties rising and falling, of rulers like Jasor Chan Kayawil, who turned military victory into divine mandate. Yet by 900 CE, Tikal's grand temple stood silent. The collapse wasn't sudden, it was a slow unraveling. Skeletons from this period show signs of malnutrition, evidence of a society pushed to its brink. The leading theory, a perfect storm of drought, deforestation, and political strife. tree rings reveal brutal dry spells, while pollen studies show maize production collapsing as soils eroded. But here's the chilling twist: the Maya saw it coming. Late carvings warn of star demons and failing harvests, a civilization documenting its own decline in real time. Rediscovered in 1848 by gum harvesters, Tikal today is a paradox, a ruin that feels alive. Howler monkeys roar from the treetops like echoes of ancient priests, and mist slithers through the plaza at dawn, blurring the line between past and present. Walking these causeways, you realize Tikal's greatest lesson isn't about collapse, it's about resilience. The Maya didn't vanish, they adapted, their descendants still thriving in the same forests. The city's silence isn't a defeat, it's a challenge, asking us to listen harder to the whispers of stone and jungle. Buried beneath the sands of present-day Pakistan lies a city so advanced it defies everything we thought we knew about ancient urban life, Mohenjo-Daro. Flourishing around 2500 BC in the Indus Valley, this wasn't just a settlement, it was a meticulously engineered metropolis, a marvel of order and efficiency that would put many modern cities to shame. Picture wide, straight streets laid out in a perfect grid, with baked brick houses featuring indoor plumbing and sophisticated drainage systems, luxuries Europe wouldn't see for another 4,000 years. Every detail, from the standardized brick sizes to the covered sewers running beneath the streets, suggests a level of central planning and civic unity that feels almost futuristic. What's even more astonishing is what we don't find. Unlike other ancient cities, Mohenjo-Daro lacks obvious palaces, temples, or grand monuments to kings. There's no evidence of a ruling elite hoarding wealth or waging wars of conquest. Instead, the city's design hints at something radical for its time, a society that prioritized collective well-being over individual power. Artifacts like soapstone seals with enigmatic script and miniature statues of contemplative figures suggest a culture steeped in trade and spirituality rather than militarism. Some scholars even argue the Indus Valley civilization might have been one of history's earliest experiments in social equality. But then, around 1900 BC, this model city was abandoned. The theories behind its fall are as intriguing as its rise. Early excavators pointed to evidence of violent destruction, skeletons scattered in streets, as if frozen in mid-flight, leading to speculation about invasions by nomadic Aryans. Yet newer research tells a different story. Geological clues reveal shifts in the Indus River's course, which could have disrupted agriculture. Layers of silt suggest catastrophic flooding, while traces of salt in the soil hint at creeping desertification from over-irrigation. The most haunting possibility, a slow unraveling from climate change with prolonged drought starving the city into oblivion. Mohenjo-Daro's legacy lingers like a ghost. Its script remains undeciphered, its people's voices silent. But walking its streets today, you can't help but wonder if this ancient city holds a mirror to our own challenges: urban planning, environmental balance, even social organization. It's a reminder that sophistication isn't just about towering monuments, but about how a society answers the most basic question: how do we live together? And perhaps its greatest lesson isn't in how it vanished, but in how it thrived. A beacon of ingenuity whispering across 45 centuries. Great Zimbabwe stands as a silent rebuke to centuries of colonial arrogance. A city of stone so magnificent that European explorers refused to believe Africans could have built it. Nestled in the hills of modern-day Zimbabwe, this sprawling complex of granite walls and conical towers was the heart of a kingdom that dominated southern Africa between the 11th and 15th centuries. At its peak, it housed up to 18,000 people, its wealth built on a web of trade stretching as far as China and the Arabian Peninsula. The very name Zimbabwe comes from the Shona phrase Dizimba Mabwe, meaning houses of stone, a humble description for structures that still inspire awe today. The genius of Great Zimbabwe lies in its dry stone masonry. Without mortar, builders stacked precisely cut granite blocks into walls 15 feet thick and 30 feet high, their curves echoing the natural contours of the landscape. The most iconic structure, the Great Enclosure, boasts an outer wall 800 feet long, its interior hiding a mysterious conical tower whose purpose still puzzles archaeologists. Was it a grain silo, a symbolic representation of royalty, or an astronomical observatory? The answers may lie in oral traditions that colonial scholars too often dismissed. This dismissal was no accident. When European explorers like Karl Marx stumbled upon the ruins in the late 19th century, they concocted wild theories about Phoenicians or the biblical Queen of Sheba being the true builders. The idea that black Africans could create such sophistication shattered their racist worldview, so they invented myths rather than face the truth. Even after archaeological evidence confirmed the city's Shona origins, white minority Rhodesian regimes suppressed the findings, going so far as to censor school textbooks. But the truth is written in the artifacts. Chinese porcelain shards, Persian glass beads, and Arab coins unearthed here reveal a kingdom at the crossroads of global commerce. The people of Great Zimbabwe traded gold mined from the region's rich veins. Some 30 million ounces were extracted before colonial exploitation alongside ivory and rare animal skins. Their merchants likely connected to Swahili coastal cities like Kilwa, funneling African wealth into Indian Ocean trade networks centuries before Europeans rounded the Cape of Good Hope. What's most haunting isn't the city's grandeur, but its quiet disappearance. By the mid-15th century, Great Zimbabwe was abandoned, possibly due to environmental strain from overpopulation or shifting trade routes. Yet its legacy endured in the Mutapa Empire and the cultural memory of the Shona people. Today, the ruins stand not just as a monument to African ingenuity, but as a testament to resilience, a reminder that history cannot be buried forever, no matter how hard the powerful try to rewrite it. Walking among these stones, you hear more than the wind. You hear the echo of a civilization that refused to be erased. Rising like a mirage from the Syrian desert, Palmyra was a city built on contradictions, an oasis where east met west, where dazzling wealth sprang from barren sands, and where a warrior queen dared to defy an empire. At its height between the 1st and 3rd centuries CE, this wasn't just a caravan stop, it was the beating heart of the Silk Road, a place where Persian silks, Indian spices, and Roman glass changed hands under colonnades of golden limestone. The Pomerans mastered the art of survival in the harshest environment, turning their city into a neutral trading hub where rival empires could do business without bloodshed. Temples to Mesopotamian gods stood beside Roman baths, and camel caravans arrived heavy with luxuries that would later grace the dining tables of emperors and caliphs. Then came Zenobia, the queen who turned a merchant city into the capital of an empire. In 270 CE, with Rome weakened by internal strife, this formidable ruler saw an opportunity. Declaring Palmyra's independence, her armies swept across the eastern provinces, conquering Egypt and much of Anatolia. Ancient historians paint her as a scholar queen fluent in multiple languages, riding into battle alongside her troops, and even challenging Rome's cultural supremacy by claiming descent from Cleopatra. For a brief, glorious moment, Palmyra wasn't just a crossroads, it was the center of its own universe. Rome's response was brutal. Emperor Aurelian laid siege to the city in 272, capturing Zenobia. Legend says she was paraded through Rome in golden chains and reducing its grand monuments to rubble. Yet, even in decline, Palmyra's magic endured. Its ruins became a pilgrimage site for poets and adventurers, the towering Temple of Bel and the iconic arch standing as testaments to a lost golden age. Then, in 2015, history's cruelty came full circle. As ISIS militants overran Syria, they targeted Palmyra with horrifying precision. The Temple of Bel was reduced to rubble by dynamite. The 2,000-year-old arch was blown apart before the world's eyes. Khald al-Assad, the 82-year-old archaeologist who had devoted his life to preserving the site, was beheaded for refusing to reveal hidden artifacts. In a matter of months, centuries of history were erased not by time but by ideology. Yet Palmyra refuses to die. Using 3D scans and archival photos, teams are painstakingly reconstructing lost monuments. Local archaeologists risked their lives to smuggle out treasures before ISIS arrived. And in a twist that would make Zenobia proud, the city's spirit persists not just in stones, but in the determination of those who remember. Palmyra's greatest lesson isn't about the past, it's about the fragile threads that connect us to history and the courage required to keep them from snapping. Before the Aztecs, before the Maya, there rose a city so grand that later civilizations believed it could only have been built by God's Teotihuacán. Stretching across the Valley of Mexico like a geometric dream, this metropolis thrived between the 1st and 7th century CE, its influence radiating across Mesoamerica. Yet for all its majesty, Teotihuacán remains one of history's most tantalizing enigmas. We don't even know what its people called themselves. The name we use today comes from the Aztecs, who stumbled upon its ruins centuries later and dubbed it the place where gods were created. Walking down the Avenue of the Dead, flanked by the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, you can't help but feel the weight of mystery. The Pyramid of the Sun isn't just massive, it's the 3rd largest pyramid in the world, its base covering nearly the same area as the Great Pyramid of Giza. But unlike Egypt's monuments, there are no inscriptions here, no pharaohs claiming credit. The builders left no written records, only silent stones whispering of a society obsessed with celestial order. Every structure aligns with cosmic precision. The avenue points to the setting of the Pleiades star cluster, while the pyramids mirror the contours of the surrounding mountains. This wasn't just urban planning, it was sacred geometry on a colossal scale. Who were these people? Archaeologists have pieced together fragments. A multi-ethnic hub where Zapotec, Maya, and others lived in distinct neighborhoods united by trade and ritual. The city's wealth came from obsidian, the volcanic glass sharper than modern surgical steel, mined and crafted into tools and weapons that circulated across continents. Murals depict a pantheon of gods, the storm god, the feathered serpent, but no single ruler. Some scholars argue Teotihuacán might have been governed by councils rather than kings, a radical idea for its time. Then around 550 CE, disaster struck. Evidence points to a violent uprising, burned palaces, shattered statues, as if the people themselves tore down their elites. Was it a revolt against inequality or the result of climate change and drought? The truth lies buried like the skeletons found in mass graves beneath the temple of the feathered serpent, sacrificial victims interred with their hands tied behind their backs. Teotihuacán's legacy lingers in the stones that refuse to tell their full story. Later cultures, the Aztecs, even modern Mexicans, claimed it as their own spiritual birthplace. Walking among its ruins, you realize this city isn't just a lost chapter of history, it's a mirror. In its silence, we hear our own questions about power, sustainability, and the rise and fall of civilizations. The real mystery isn't why Teotihuacán fell. It's how something so monumental could vanish from memory, only to haunt us centuries later. Beneath the waves off India's western coast lies a mystery that blurs the line between myth and history: Dwarka, the sunken kingdom of Lord Krishna. According to ancient Hindu texts like the Mahabharata and Puranas, this was no ordinary city. Dwarka was a celestial metropolis, its streets paved with gold, its towers studded with gems, a divine gift to Krishna after he abandoned Mathura. The texts describe a bustling port with 700,000 palaces, a city so radiant it seemed carved from lightning. But when Krishna departed the earth, Dwarka was consumed by the sea in a single cataclysmic event, vanishing beneath the waves as if the gods themselves had reclaimed it. For centuries, scholars dismissed these accounts as poetic fantasy until marine archaeologists began pulling evidence from the ocean floor. In the late 1980s, near modern-day Dwarka in Gujarat, researchers discovered submerged stone structures at depths of up to 120 feet. Massive rectangular blocks, some weighing over half a ton, lay scattered across the seabed, their precise geometry unmistakably man-made. Pottery shards carbon dated to 1500 BC, the very era linked to Krishna's legend, emerged from the sediment. Then came the clincher, an ancient Angkor stone, its design matching descriptions in Sanskrit texts, found alongside a submerged river channel that once connected to the mainland. These weren't random artifacts, they pointed to a sophisticated harbor city suddenly engulfed by rising seas. Geologists now believe Dwarka's fate aligns with a dramatic post-Ice Age phenomenon. Around 3,500 years ago, as glaciers melted, global sea levels rose by several feet, drowning coastal settlements worldwide. The Gulf of Combat, where Dwarka's ruins lie, would have been especially vulnerable. But what's startling isn't just the city's existence, it's the eerie accuracy of the ancient accounts. The Mahabharata describes Dwarka's destruction with haunting precision. The sea rushed into the city, submerging the beautiful buildings one after another. Even the timeline fits. Krishna's death and the city's flooding coincide with the archaeological evidence. Yet the debate rages on. Skeptics argue the underwater structures could be natural formations or remnants of a later port. The lack of in situ inscriptions, no carvings naming Krishna or his kingdom, leaves room for doubt. But for believers, Dwarka's significance transcends mere archaeology. This isn't just a lost city, it's a sacred nexus where faith and science collide, where a single discovery could rewrite our understanding of Indian history. The search continues, with sonar mapping revealing even larger submerged ruins yet to be excavated. Every artifact pulled from the depths whispers the same tantalizing question. If the legends got Dwarka right, what else might they be hiding? The ocean guards its secrets well, but as the waves slowly recede with each low tide, they seem to tease us, offering glimpses of a golden city still waiting to be fully remembered. Among the rolling grasslands of Inner Mongolia, where the wind carries whispers of empires past, lies the ghost of a city that once dazzled the world, Xanadu, the summer capital of Kublai Khan. This wasn't just a retreat, it was a statement in stone and silk, a place where the Mongol ruler, grandson of Genghis Khan, blended the nomadic traditions of the steppes with the grandeur of Chinese imperial design. Picture marble pavilions crowned with gilded roofs, gardens stocked with exotic animals from across the Silk Road, and hunting grounds so vast they sprawled beyond the horizon. Here, in this lush oasis far from the dust of battle, Kublai Khan entertained diplomats, scholars, and artists, crafting an image of a ruler who could conquer not just with the sword but with splendor. Yet Xanadu's immortality owes as much to poetry as to history. In 1797, the English poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge, under the influence of opium, spun a fragment of travel writing into one of literature's most enchanting visions. His poem Kublai Khan transformed the city into a dreamscape. In Xanadu did Kublai Khan a stately pleasure dome decree where Alph, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man down to a sunless sea. These lines, equal parts myth and mystery, cemented Xanadu's place in the Western imagination as a symbol of impossible luxury and creative obsession. The irony: Coleridge never set foot in Mongolia. His Xanadu was a hallucination, a shimmering mirage of what the real city might have been. Today, the truth lies scattered across a quiet archaeological site near the modern town of Shangdu. Excavations reveal traces of the city's double walls, the outer layer for commoners, the inner sanctum reserved for the elite, and the foundations of Kublai's palace where Marco Polo likely knelt before the Khan. Bits of porcelain glazed in cobalt blue hint at trade routes stretching to Persia, while fragments of Buddhist sculptures speak to the religious tolerance that defined Mongol rule. But the most haunting relic isn't a treasure, it's the landscape itself. The same grasslands that once hosted feasts under starry skies now swallow the city's bones, leaving only subtle undulations in the earth as clues. What makes Xanadu unforgettable isn't just its physical remnants, but the tension between what was and what we've imagined. Coleridge's poem ends with a warning: beware. Beware his flashing eyes, his floating hair. As if the dream of Xanadu is too potent to fully grasp. In a way, he was right. The real city may be faded, but its dual legacy endures, a testament to the power of empire to build and the power of art to rebuild long after the stones have turned to dust. Standing in this windswept plain, you realize Xanadu was never just a place. It was an idea, one that still dances just out of reach between history and legend. Buried beneath the dusty plains of modern Turkey lies a city so ancient, it rewrites our understanding of human civilization, Çatalhöyük. This sprawling Neolithic settlement, dating back over 9,000 years, wasn't just a village. It was a groundbreaking experiment in urban living, a place where humanity's first steps toward community unfolded in ways that still baffle archaeologists. Picture a hive of mud brick homes crammed so tightly together that residents moved across rooftops, descending into their dwellings through holes in the ceiling. No streets, no palaces, no grand temples, just a labyrinth of interconnected lives, where the line between sacred and everyday blurred into something profoundly human. What sets Çatalhöyük apart isn't just its age, but its art. The walls of these cramped homes pulse with vibrant murals, the world's oldest known paintings. Bulls with sweeping horns, vultures circling headless figures, geometric patterns that might map the stars or the harvest. Each stroke of pigment tells a story. One famous fresco captures a volcanic eruption, its twin peaks spewing fiery plumes, proving these early people weren't just surviving, they were observing, interpreting, creating. Even more striking, the skulls, dozens of them plastered and painted to recreate human faces, buried beneath floors like silent guardians. This wasn't just decoration, it was ritual memory, a bridge between the living and the dead. But the real revolution was social. Çatalhöyük's ruins reveal no signs of kings or elites. Homes were nearly identical in size, their contents suggesting shared wealth. Skeletons show no evidence of violence, no weapon wounds, no mass graves. Instead, we find a society that valued equality, where women and men ate the same diets and performed similar labor. The absence of fortifications hints at something radical. Perhaps these weren't people living in fear, but in collaboration. Their greatest monument wasn't a pyramid or a palace, it was the collective act of staying together, generation after generation, in a world where solitude meant death. Yet the mystery lingers. Why abandon such a successful model? Around 5000 BCE, Çatalhöyük was deserted. Climate shifts may have strained agriculture, or perhaps the very closeness that sustained them became stifling as populations grew. Whatever the reason, the city's legacy endures in the quietest ways. When you look at those ancient murals, the hands that painted them, the eyes that admired them, you're not seeing primitive art. You're seeing the birth of curiosity, of storytelling, of the human need to make meaning. Çatalhöyük doesn't just show us how we lived, it shows us how we became us. And in that dusty Turkish soil, the most extraordinary discovery isn't a skull or a painting. It's the realization that 9 millennia later, we're still asking the same questions they were. Centuries before Columbus stumbled upon the Caribbean, Norse longships were already slicing through the frigid waters of North America, a fact so radical that even archaeologists resisted it for generations. Welcome to Vinland, the lost Viking frontier, where rough-hewn settlements like Elant's Ox Meadows in Newfoundland stand as silent witnesses to Europe's first ill-fated attempt to colonize the New World. The sagas, those epic Viking chronicles, spoke of this place as a land of wild grapes and boundless timber, where the sun lingered longer than in icy Greenland. But what really happened when these iron-helmed explorers met the indigenous peoples already thriving there, and why did their bold venture collapse within a decade? The story begins with Leif Erikson, son of Greenland's infamous outlaw Erik the Red. Around the year 1000, guided by rumors from a wayward trader named Bjarni Herjolfsson, Leif sailed west into the unknown. His crew marveled at the lush coastlines, so different from their barren homelands. They named the region's Helluland Slabland, likely Baffin Island, Markland Forest Land, probably Labrador, and finally Vinland, either for grapevines or, as some linguists argue, grassy meadows where grazing animals could fatten before winter. At Elant's Ox Meadows, archaeologists unearthed unmistakable proof: Norse-style turf houses, a bronze cloak pin, and iron slag from smithing, all carbon dated to exactly Leif's era. This wasn't just a campsite, it was a base camp for deeper exploration, a workshop for repairing ships, and a gateway to a continent Vikings would never fully claim. Then came the encounters that doomed Vinland. The sagas call them Skraelings, a term both dismissive and fearful, describing the indigenous Dorset and Thule peoples. At first, trade flourished. Norsemen bartered red cloth for pelts, both sides cautious but curious. But tensions flared over misunderstandings and Viking arrogance. One account tells of a bull charging from the Norse camp, terrifying locals who'd never seen such an animal. Another describes a skirmish after a native man grabbed a Viking weapon, a moment that spiraled into violence, leaving 8 indigenous people dead before the Norse fled. The lesson was clear: unlike Greenland's empty fjords, this land wasn't theirs for the taking. Climate sealed Vinland's fate. The Norse arrived during the medieval warm period, but by the mid-11th century, temperatures plummeted. Ice choked the northern seas, isolating Greenland's colonies and making transatlantic voyages suicidal. Back home, Norway's kings consolidated power, diverting Viking ambition from exploration to civil wars. And crucially, the Norse lacked what later Europeans would exploit: immunity to New World diseases that might have devastated indigenous populations. Instead of conquerors, they became a footnote, their sagas dismissed as fantasy until a Norwegian couple, Helge and Anne Stein Ingstad, followed the clues to Newfoundland in the 1960s. Today, Vinland's legacy is a paradox. It's a triumph of exploration and a cautionary tale about cultural collision. The Vikings had better ships and swords than the Skraelings, but they lacked the one thing that might have let them stay: humility. Walking through Elant's Ox Meadows, where Norse hearths lie steps from indigenous shell middens, you realize this wasn't just the first European settlement in America. It was the first failure, and perhaps the only time indigenous peoples held the line against colonization, ensuring the Americas remained unknown to Europe for 500 more years. The wind here carries echoes of what might have been and what was wisely, tragically prevented. On the shimmering coast of what is now Libya, a city once stood that rivaled Rome itself in splendor: Leptis Magna. Born as a modest Phoenician trading post, it reached its zenith under the reign of Emperor Septimius Severus, the only African-born ruler to ever sit on the imperial throne. The emperor showered his hometown with such extravagant gifts that it became known as the Rome of Africa, a dazzling showcase of marble and ambition. Picture colonnaded streets stretching toward the sea, a circus roaring with chariot races, and a harbor so grand it could anchor the entire Mediterranean fleet. The Severan Basilica, with its towering Corinthian columns, wasn't just a courthouse, it was a monument to power, its walls echoing with the whispers of senators and merchants who shaped an empire. Yet Leptis Magna's fortune was as fragile as the desert winds that eventually buried it. After Severus's death in 211 CE, Rome's grip on North Africa weakened. The Vandals sacked the city in the 5th century, followed by the Byzantines, who patched it up like a fading heirloom. But the final blow came not from war but from nature itself. Slowly, relentlessly, the sands crept in. The same dunes that once protected trade routes became a suffocating shroud, swallowing forums and theaters whole. By the time Arab scholars wrote of its ruins in the 10th century, Leptis Magna was already a ghost, its name barely remembered. Rediscovery came in fits and starts. Ottoman travelers marveled at half-buried arches in the 16th century, but it wasn't until the 1920s that archaeologists began peeling back the desert's grip. What they uncovered was staggering: a theater with acoustics so perfect a whisper could reach the highest seats, mosaic floors depicting Neptune's rippling waves, even an amphitheater where gladiators once battled beasts shipped in from the Sahara. The city's sewage system, advanced even by Roman standards, still snakes beneath the streets, a hidden testament to urban genius. What makes Leptis Magna extraordinary isn't just its scale, but its solitude. Unlike Pompeii, frozen in a single catastrophic moment, this city's decline was a slow unraveling, a cautionary tale about the fragility of even the mightiest civilizations. Today, its ruins stand eerily intact, far from modern crowds, as if the empire never truly left. The marble head of Severus still gazes from museum displays, his stern expression a silent challenge. Will we remember greatness when the sands of time inevitably rise? The answer seems to whisper through the empty colonnades, carried on the same salty breeze that once filled the sails of Leptis Magna's golden age. Rising from the turquoise waters of Micronesia like a labyrinth of black stone, Nan Madol is a city that defies logic. Built entirely atop a coral reef, this ancient metropolis consists of 92 artificial islands linked by canals, soaring basalt columns stacked like matchsticks to form walls 15 feet high. The locals call it the Venice of the Pacific, but that comparison doesn't quite capture its eerie grandeur. Venice had centuries of gradual construction. Nan Madol seems to have appeared almost overnight, its megalithic architecture so precise that modern engineers still debate how it was possible without metal tools or pulleys. The secret lies in the stones themselves. Each column is a hexagonal prism of volcanic basalt, some weighing over 50 tons, quarried from the opposite side of Pompeii Island. Legends say the Sordilor dynasty, Nan Madol's ruling elite, commanded them to float across the water through magic, a poetic explanation for what was likely a feat of coordinated manpower and log rollers. But the real mystery isn't just how they moved these stones, it's why they chose such an unforgiving location. Building on tidal flats meant no fresh water, no farmland, and constant exposure to typhoons. This wasn't a city designed for survival, it was a fortress of power, a stage for rituals so potent that even today, Pohnpeian fishermen avoid its waters at night, whispering of restless spirits. Those rituals revolved around the Sordilors, a line of god-kings who ruled with absolute authority. Oral traditions describe their reign as both glorious and tyrannical. They demanded tributes of breadfruit and turtle meat from neighboring villages, hoarding wealth in palaces like Nan Dawa's, whose vaulted chambers still echo with the weight of history. One legend tells of a magical eel, the embodiment of the Sordilor's power, kept in a sacred pool until a rebel fed it a poisoned coconut, breaking the dynasty's grip. Whether myth or metaphor, the story hints at a rebellion that toppled the rulers, leaving Nan Madol to the tides and vines. Archaeologists have uncovered chilling clues to the city's dark side. Human remains with bound wrists suggest sacrifices, while carved stones depict gaping mouths, perhaps symbols of the Sordilor's insatiable hunger for control. Yet there's also evidence of astonishing ingenuity. Tidal gates that flushed waste from the canals, and coral-lined pits that may have served as primitive refrigerators. This duality, brutality and brilliance, makes Nan Madol so haunting. Today, the ruins stand as a warning written in stone. Mangroves twist through collapsed walls, and kingfishers dart through empty courtyards where priests once chanted. The ocean, once tamed by canals, now gnaws at the foundations. Nan Madol's legacy isn't just in its stones, but in its silence, a reminder that even the mightiest kingdoms are just whispers waiting to drown in the waves. High on the windswept plateau of central Turkey, where the land rises like a fortress, stands the remnant of a forgotten superpower, Hattusa, capital of the Hittite Empire. This wasn't just a city, it was the nerve center of a civilization that rivaled Egypt and Babylon, its rulers commanding an army of iron chariots that reshaped the ancient world. Picture walls 30 feet thick, guarded by stone lions and sphinxes, their faces worn smooth by 3,000 years of storms. At its peak in the 13th century BC, Hattusa was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy, its scribes penning treaties in cuneiform on clay tablets, some of the earliest surviving peace accords in history. One such agreement, the Treaty of Kadesh with Egypt, carved its terms not just in Hittite but in the language of their rivals, a gesture of respect that stopped a war and started an uneasy alliance. The city's gates tell stories in stone. The Lion Gate, its massive beast snarling at invaders, symbolized raw power. The King's Gate, adorned with a relief of a warrior god, whispered of divine mandate. But the most haunting is the Sphinx Gate, where hybrid creatures with human faces and eagle wings stood sentinel, their watchful eyes meant to ward off evil. These weren't mere decorations, they were psychological weapons designed to awe allies and unnerve enemies long before they reached the inner sanctum. Inside those walls, temples to storm gods like Tarhunter dwarfed even the palaces, their altars piled high with offerings to deities who controlled the very skies. Yet for all its might, Hattusa's fall was as swift as it was mysterious. Around 1200 BC, the city burned. The empire that had stood for centuries collapsed almost overnight, its records ending mid-sentence in clay tablets charred by fire. Theories abound: invasion by the enigmatic sea peoples, internal rebellion, or perhaps a catastrophic drought that starved the Hittites of both grain and loyalty. But here's the chilling detail: archaeologists found no mass graves, no final stand. Instead, the ruins suggest a quiet abandonment, as if the last citizens simply walked away, leaving their gods to the wind. The silence of Hattusa's ruins speaks volumes. Unlike Rome or Athens, its name faded from memory until 19th century scholars deciphered those clay tablets, piecing together an empire lost to time. Today, walking among the fallen walls, you can almost hear the echoes of chariots and the whispers of diplomats negotiating the fate of nations. The Hittites didn't just vanish, they were swallowed by history's shadows, waiting centuries for someone to read their story in the ashes. Their greatest legacy, a reminder that even empires forged in iron can crumble, leaving behind only stone guardians to mourn what once was. Perched high in the alcoves of Colorado's canyon walls, Mesa Verde's cliff dwellings seem to defy gravity and time itself. These stone and mortar structures, tucked beneath sweeping overhangs, weren't just shelters, they were the pinnacle of ancestral Puebloan ingenuity, a civilization that thrived here for over 700 years. Imagine entire villages suspended between earth and sky, their multi-story towers clinging to rock faces like swallows' nests. The largest cliff palace boasts 150 rooms and 23 kivas, circular ceremonial chambers where whispers of rituals still seem to linger in the dry air. But what's most striking isn't just how they built these homes, it's why they chose such precarious ledges. The answer lies in a delicate dance with nature, one that eventually turned against them. Life in Mesa Verde was a masterclass in adaptation. The ancestral Puebloans weren't just passive inhabitants of these cliffs, they engineered them. They channeled rainwater from mesa tops into reservoirs, carved hand and toe holds to scale sheer rock faces, and positioned their homes to maximize winter sunlight and summer shade. Their pottery, woven baskets, and intricate turquoise jewelry reveal a culture rich in artistry and trade. Yet their greatest innovation was social, a tightly knit community where every member played a role, from the farmers tending terraced fields atop the mesas to the artisans crafting tools from local sandstone. But around 1275 CE, something shifted. Tree rings tell a grim story. A decades-long drought parched the land, withering crops and draining water stores. Then came the colder temperatures, a little ice age that shortened growing seasons. The very cliffs that had protected them became traps, as dwindling resources made sustaining large populations impossible. Archaeologists find eerie evidence of a deliberate departure. Storage rooms sealed with care, doors walled up, as if the people hoped to return, but they never did. Theories abound about where they went. Oral traditions of modern Pueblo tribes, like the Hopi and Zuni, suggest migrations southward, where their descendants still honor Mesa Verde as a sacred ancestral home. Others speculate that splinter groups dispersed, blending into neighboring cultures. What's clear is that this wasn't a collapse born of war or invasion. It was a calculated retreat in the face of environmental crisis. Today, Mesa Verde's silent cliff dwellings stand as a testament to resilience and hard choices. Walking those canyon trails, you can't help but wonder, if they could build such marvels against impossible odds, what might they have achieved if the rains had come? Their legacy isn't one of failure, but of survival written in stone and shadow. Beneath the waters of the Mediterranean, just off Egypt's coast, lies a city so legendary that historians once debated whether it was real at all: Thonis-Heracleion. For centuries, this place existed only in fragments, a mention in Herodotus's histories, a line in an ancient stele, whispers of a bustling port where Greek merchants rubbed shoulders with Egyptian priests. Then, in the early 2000s, marine archaeologist Frank Godio's team made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the academic world. A sprawling underwater metropolis, its temples and statues preserved in the silt like a time capsule from another age. This wasn't just any port. Thonis-Heracleion was the gateway to Egypt, the compulsory stop for all foreign ships before they could sail up the Nile. Imagine docks teeming with Phoenician traders unloading cedar wood, Greek ships heavy with olive oil, and Egyptian officials collecting taxes in gleaming silver. The city's dual name tells its story: Thonis to the Egyptians, Heracleion to the Greeks, a melting pot of cultures where the god Ammon merged with Zeus in shared temples. Divers have pulled astonishing artifacts from the seabed: a 5.5-meter tall statue of the Nile god Hapi, stone slabs inscribed in hieroglyphs and Greek declaring pharaonic decrees, even gold coins and delicate jewelry that slipped from merchants' hands as the waves claimed the streets. But how does a city this vital vanish? The answer lies in the very ground it stood on. Built on unstable clay and sand, Thonis-Heracleion was always fighting the sea. Add earthquakes, tsunamis, and rising waters from the 8th century onward, and the land simply liquefied. Buildings sank intact, swallowed so quickly that daily life was frozen in place, anchors still stacked near warehouses, ritual barges submerged mid-ceremony. The most haunting finds are the dozens of shipwrecks, some dating back to the 4th century BCE. Their cargoes of wine amphorae and bronze weights perfectly preserved in the oxygen-starved clay. What's emerging now rewrites history. The discovery of a network of canals challenges old assumptions about ancient trade routes, while a trove of Greek weapons suggests a mercenary presence long before Alexander's conquest. Perhaps most poignant is a small stele found near the Temple of Ammon, its inscription resolving a centuries-old debate. Thonis and Heracleion weren't two cities but one. The sea, it seems, kept its secrets well, but not forever. Every artifact hauled from the depths whispers the same truth: some cities never truly die. They just wait, silent and patient, for the tides of time to turn. Rising from the floodplains of the Mississippi River like an ancient American echo of Egypt's pyramids, Cahokia was a city that defied every stereotype about pre-Columbian North America. At its peak around 1100 CE, this sprawling metropolis located near modern-day St. Louis boasted a population of 20,000, rivaling London and Paris at the time. But what truly staggers the imagination isn't just its size, it's the audacity of its architecture. Monk's Mound, the colossal earthen pyramid at Cahokia's heart, stretches over 14 acres at its base and rises 100 feet high. Built entirely by hand, basket load by basket load, it's the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas, a monument so vast it took 3 centuries to complete. Imagine the coordination, the sheer communal will, required to move 55 million cubic feet of dirt without beasts of burden or metal tools. Cahokia wasn't just a collection of mounds, it was a carefully planned cosmopolis. The Grand Plaza, flanked by smaller pyramids, could hold 10,000 people for ceremonies witnessed by a wooden Stonehenge-like structure now called Woodhenge, a circle of towering cedar posts aligned to track solstices and equinoxes. Archaeologists have found evidence of copper workshops, intricate pottery, and a trade network stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. The city's influence radiated outward like ripples in water, its art and rituals shaping cultures across the continent. Yet, unlike Rome or Zion, Cahokia left no written records. Its story is written in soil and skeletons, in seashell beads and the charred remains of sacred fires. Then there's the mystery of its fall. By 1400 CE, Cahokia was abandoned. The leading theory, climate chaos. Tree rings reveal a devastating 50-year drought in the 1300s, crippling the maize-based economy. But there's darker evidence too, mass graves from what may have been ritual sacrifices or societal collapse, including one pit holding 53 women strangled to death. Some scholars argue the city's elite grew too powerful, their demands for tribute sparking rebellion. Others point to deforestation and soil exhaustion, a warning etched in the very land. Today, Cahokia's silence speaks volumes. Descendant tribes like the Osage and Quapaw carry fragments of its legacy in oral traditions. But the city itself became a ghost, its name lost until white settlers rediscovered the mounds and dismissed them as natural formations. Walking among these grass-covered pyramids, you realize Cahokia isn't just a lost city. It's a challenge to rewrite our understanding of American history. These weren't primitive tribes, they were master engineers, astronomers, and diplomats whose collapse holds uncomfortable parallels for our own era of climate uncertainty and social strain. The mounds endure not as ruins but as questions waiting for us to listen. Rising from the jungles of central Sri Lanka like a stone sentinel, Sigiriya isn't just a fortress, it's a haunting marriage of nature and human audacity. Picture a massive granite column towering 600 feet above the forest canopy, its flat summit crowned with the ruins of a 5th-century palace so lavish, early visitors dubbed it the 8th wonder of the ancient world. But this was no ordinary stronghold. King Kashyapa, a monarch fleeing his brother's rightful claim to the throne, transformed this volcanic plug into a paranoid's paradise, an impregnable kingdom in the sky where he ruled for 18 years, surrounded by art, opulence, and the ever-present fear of betrayal. The climb to the summit alone feels like a journey through layers of myth and engineering genius. At the base, the ruins of elaborate water gardens shimmer with symmetrical pools and fountains that still function during monsoon rains. Halfway up, a sheer rock face becomes a canvas for the Sigiriya damsels, 21 ethereal frescoes of women painted in pigments that defy time, their jewel-toned hues as vibrant today as when they were brushed 15 centuries ago. Some scholars believe they're apsaras, celestial nymphs. Others claim they're portraits of Kashyapa's concubines or even participants in rain-making rituals. Their enigmatic smiles follow you as you ascend, a silent audience to every step. Then comes the Lion's Gate, the moment that gives Sigiriya its name. What remains today are 2 colossal paws, each the size of a small car, carved from the living rock. Once, these belonged to a gargantuan brick and plaster lion, its open mouth forming the entrance to the final staircase. Climbers would pass through its jaws, literally walking into the beast's belly before emerging onto the summit. It's a psychological masterstroke. By the time invaders or supplicants reached Kashyapa's throne, they'd already been humbled by art, exertion, and sheer terror. The summit itself is a ghost of grandeur. The foundations of the palace outline a pleasure complex with pools, pavilions, and even a mirror wall, so highly polished that Cassiopeia could see his reflection as he walked. Inscriptions scratched by visitors over centuries cover its surface, some praising the frescoes, others marveling at the engineering. One ancient graffiti poet laments, "The rock is high, but my desire to see the damsels is higher." Yet Sigiria's fate was as dramatic as its creation. After Cassiopeia's death in battle, his brother's army reportedly scaled the rock by attacking during dry season. When the moats were empty, the fortress became a Buddhist monastery before fading into obscurity. The jungle swallowed its staircases, and local legends spoke of a demon king who'd once ruled the skies. When British archaeologist H.C.P. Bell rediscovered it in 1890, vines had strangled the frescoes and the lion's head had collapsed into rubble. Today, Sigiria whispers dual truths of a tyrant's vanity and an artist's vision. The same king who built this fortress out of fear also commissioned some of Asia's most breathtaking art. His mirror wall reflects not just faces but the paradox of human ambition, our capacity to create beauty even from desperation, and the way time turns even the mightiest fortresses into stages for echoes. Standing on that wind-whipped summit, you realize the real treasure isn't the gold Cassiopeia hoarded or the throne he clung to, it's the enduring proof that from fear, even a monster can birth something immortal. Long before the Inca shaped stones into Machu Picchu, another civilization was already laying the foundations of urban life in the shadows of the Andes Carol. Flourishing along the arid Supe Valley of Peru nearly 5,000 years ago, this sprawling complex of pyramids, plazas, and residential quarters holds a staggering title, the oldest known city in the Americas. Imagine a metropolis older than the Great Pyramids of Giza, its sun-baked adobe structures humming with activity while Europe's Neolithic tribes were still gathering in villages. What makes Carol extraordinary isn't just its age, but what its ruins reveal, a society that mastered the art of living together without war, without pottery, even without the wheel. At the heart of Carol lies a mystery wrapped in geometry. The city's design is a symphony of precise alignments, with 6 massive pyramidal mounds arranged in a crescent around a central plaza. The largest pyramid Maya rises 90 feet high and covers an area equivalent to 4 football fields. But these weren't just monuments to power, they were instruments of cosmology. Archaeologists found evidence that the pyramid staircases align with celestial events, like the rising of certain constellations during the solstices. Even more intriguing, the city's architects incorporated wind channels into their designs, funneling coastal breezes to naturally cool interiors, an ancient form of air conditioning in one of the world's driest deserts. The true genius of Carol, though, lies in its economy, one built not on conquest or gold, but on trade and mutual dependence. Excavations uncovered piles of anchovy bones and shellfish remains, proof that coastal fishermen bartered their catch for cotton grown by inland farmers. This wasn't subsistence living, it was a sophisticated exchange network spanning hundreds of miles. The Carol people even developed a system of knotted cords called quipu millennia before the Inca refined it, suggesting an early form of record-keeping. But what's missing speaks volumes: no weapons, no fortifications, no signs of violent conflict. In a world where ancient cities often rose and fell by the sword, Carol thrived for 1,000 years through collaboration. Then, around 1800 BC, the lights went out. The same environmental ingenuity that sustained Carol may have doomed it. Studies of sediment layers reveal catastrophic earthquakes and El Niño-induced floods that disrupted the delicate balance between desert and sea. As farmlands drowned and fishing grounds shifted, the trade networks unraveled. The people didn't vanish, they likely dispersed into smaller communities, carrying fragments of their culture into the Andes. Today, walking through Carol's sun-bleached ruins, you're struck not by what was lost, but by what was achieved. Here, in a landscape so harsh it defies survival, humanity proved that civilization could blossom without tyranny or bloodshed. The pyramids whisper a radical idea that our first cities weren't forged in fire, but in the quiet understanding that together we could build something greater than ourselves. And perhaps that's why Carol feels less like a ruin and more like a promise, one etched into the very bones of the earth. Timgad stands frozen in time, a masterclass in Roman urban planning where every stone seems placed with mathematical precision. Founded in 100 CE by Emperor Trajan as a military colony for veterans, this Algerian city was designed as a perfect square, a grid of streets so exact that modern architects still study its blueprints. Walk down the Decumanus Maximus, its main thoroughfare, and you'll find the same cobblestones that echoed with the boots of legionaries 2,000 years ago. But what makes Timgad extraordinary isn't just its preservation. It's the way it encapsulates Rome's imperial philosophy, order as a form of control, beauty as a tool of civilization. Here, conquerors weren't just building barracks, they were exporting an ideal, stone by stone. The city's genius lies in its democratic grandeur. Unlike Rome's chaotic sprawl, Timgad offered every citizen, whether retired centurion or local Berber trader, equal access to its marvels. Public libraries with scrolls in Latin and Greek, 14 bathhouses with intricate mosaic floors, a theater seating 3,000 where performances ranged from Plautus comedies to gladiator bouts, all served as daily reminders that even on the empire's edge, you were part of something vast and sophisticated. The Arch of Trajan, still standing at the western gate, wasn't just a monument, it was a promise. Its inscription declared this dusty outpost a colony of freedom, a place where soldiers who'd shed blood for Rome could reap the fruits of its culture. Yet Timgad's fate reveals the fragility of even the best-laid plans. After the Vandals sacked it in the 5th century, Byzantine forces reclaimed the city, fortifying its once open plazas with hasty walls. But the final blow came with the Arab conquest in the 7th century. As the new rulers shifted trade routes and power centers, Timgad's perfect streets were abandoned to the Sahara. The desert, patient and relentless, did what no invading army could. It didn't destroy the city, but simply buried it layer by layer until only the arch's tip peeked above the dunes like a stone finger pointing at the sky. Rediscovered in 1881, Timgad's ruins shocked scholars with their pristine condition. Unlike Pompeii, preserved by catastrophe, or Rome, rebuilt over centuries, this was a city suspended in amber. A bakery's oven still held charred loaves. Dice lay scattered in taverns where soldiers once gambled. Most haunting, the hundreds of bronze voters' tokens found near the Forum, proof that even here on the empire's fringe, citizens debated and voted. Today, Timgad whispers a dual lesson. Its grid speaks of Rome's confidence, its belief that geometry could tame wilderness. But the sand drifting through its empty theater asks, can any order outlast the tides of history? The stones remain, perfect as the day they were laid, waiting for an audience that will never return. Buried beneath the shifting sands of China's Taklamakan Desert lies a secret so perfectly preserved, it feels like stepping into a mirage. Nia, the lost oasis city of the Tarim Basin. This wasn't just another Silk Road trading post. It was a cultural crossroads frozen in time, where the footprints of forgotten civilizations still linger in the dust. Picture wooden houses with Corinthian columns standing sentinel over orchards of long-dead fruit trees, their timbers bleached white by centuries of unrelenting sun. Here, the desert didn't just bury a city, it mummified an entire way of life, down to the very threads of its people's clothing. The real enigma of Nia isn't just its ruins, but its people. In the early 20th century, explorers like Aurel Stein stumbled upon graves holding mummies so astonishingly intact, their eyelashes still fluttered in the dry wind. These weren't the expected Han Chinese or Mongol faces. They were tall, red-haired, clad in tartan wool that wouldn't look out of place in Celtic Europe. DNA tests later confirmed the impossible. These were descendants of Bronze Age migrants from the steppes, likely the Tocharians, a mysterious Indo-European people who spoke a language closer to ancient German than Mandarin. How did they end up here, founding a Buddhist kingdom in the heart of Asia? The answer lies in Nia's role as a Silk Road lifeline, where caravan routes converged like strands of a spider's web, weaving together cultures from Rome to Xi'an. Artifacts tell the story of a city both cosmopolitan and isolated. Kharosthi script on wooden tablets, an administrative language borrowed from India, details everything from wine taxes to disputes over stolen camels. A Roman-style glass bead necklace rests beside a Chinese lacquer box, while Hellenistic carvings of cherubs adorn Buddhist shrines, the most poignant find. A well-preserved wooden sign hanging from a doorway, its fading inscription still legible. This is the house of the son of the king. No grand palace stood nearby, just the same modest homes as the rest of the city, suggesting a ruler who lived among his people, not above them. Then, around the 4th century CE, Nia vanished. The usual suspects war, shifting trade routes play their part, but the desert tells a subtler tale. Pollen samples reveal a slow death by thirst, as the nearby Nia River changed course or dried up entirely. Without water, the orchards withered, the caravans bypassed the oasis, and the Tocharians likely dispersed into neighboring regions. The sand moved in like a silent conqueror, filling doorways and covering streets until only the mummies remained, guardians of a kingdom that history nearly forgot. Today, Nia's ghosts challenge our assumptions about cultural boundaries. Those red-haired mummies force us to rewrite the map of human migration, while their tartan and chariots suggest connections spanning continents. Walking through the ruins, you're left with a haunting thought. Civilizations don't always end with a bang. Sometimes they simply fade like footprints in the dunes, waiting for the wind to uncover them again. And perhaps that's Nia's greatest gift, not the treasures it left behind, but the questions it forces us to ask about who weaves the threads of history and how easily those threads can unravel. Buried beneath layers of volcanic ash on the Greek island of Santorini, Akrotiri waits like a time capsule from a forgotten world, a Minoan city so perfectly preserved, its vibrant frescoes still glow with the colors of a civilization in full bloom. Unlike Pompeii, frozen in a single catastrophic moment, Akrotiri's ruins tell a story of foresight and near miss. When the thorough eruption tore the island apart around 1600 BC, its residents had already fled, leaving behind empty streets and silent homes. What remains is a snapshot of Bronze Age life so detailed, archaeologists can trace fingerprints in dried plaster and follow the paths of missing furniture across mosaic floors. The walls here don't just whisper, they sing. Akrotiri's frescoes are masterpieces of motion and light, capturing antelopes mid-leap, fishermen hauling nets under a sapphire sky, and saffron gatherers tending scarlet blooms. One iconic scene, the flotilla fresco, stretches across multiple panels like a prehistoric comic strip, depicting ships with striped sails navigating between bustling ports. These aren't mere decorations, they're windows into a culture that celebrated nature's rhythms and humanity's connection to the sea. The absence of warlike imagery is striking, no conquering kings, no scenes of battle. Instead, we see a society enthralled by beauty where artists held sacred status. Then there's the Atlantis connection. When Plato described a sophisticated island kingdom swallowed by the sea, was he echoing garbled memories of Akrotiri's fate? The parallels are tantalizing. A maritime power with advanced plumbing, Akrotiri had multi-story buildings with flush toilets, a catastrophic collapse, even the circular layout of Santorini's caldera mirroring Plato's concentric city design. Some scholars argue Minoan refugees fleeing the eruption carried their stories to Egypt, where Solon, Plato's source, might have heard them centuries later. Others dismiss this as wishful thinking, pointing out that Akrotiri's ruins were buried, not sunk. But Akrotiri's real magic lies in its unanswered questions. Why did everyone escape? Seismic foreshocks likely gave warning, yet the lack of human remains or precious objects suggests an orderly evacuation. Where did they go? No mass graves or refugee settlements have been found, leaving their fate as mysterious as the city's final hours. Even the volcano's timing is debated. Tree rings and ice cores suggest the eruption might have triggered global cooling, with ashen skies dimming the sun for years. Today, walking through Akrotiri's covered excavation site feels like trespassing in a dream. The stillness is uncanny, the echoes of bustling streets replaced by the hum of climate control systems preserving millennia-old pigments. Unlike Pompeii's tragic casts, Akrotiri's ghosts are invisible, their absence more haunting than any corpse. The city's silent flight challenges our obsession with dramatic ends sometimes. The most profound mysteries aren't about how civilizations fall, but how they choose to let go. The Amazon has swallowed countless explorers whole, their bones dissolving in its acidic soil, their names fading into the green abyss. But perhaps none haunt the jungle's imagination quite like Colonel Percy Fawcett, the British adventurer who vanished in 1925 chasing a city he called Z. This wasn't just a quest for ruins, it was an obsession that blurred the lines between archaeology and madness, between vision and delusion. Fawcett insisted that somewhere beneath the canopy lay not just a settlement, but a sprawling, golden metropolis, a cradle of civilization older than the Inca, untouched by European hands. Skeptics dismissed him as a relic of Victorian exoticism, another white man projecting his fantasies onto the rainforest. But what if he wasn't entirely wrong? Fawcett's theories weren't plucked from thin air. During his early 20th century surveys for Britain's Royal Geographical Society, he'd uncovered tantalizing clues, crumbling stone markers, local legends of a great house of the sun, and indigenous accounts of a place so sacred outsiders who found it never returned. His conviction hardened after stumbling upon the overgrown ruins of Cuacugu in the Xingu region, proof that complex societies had indeed flourished in the Amazon. But Fawcett craved something grander. He envisioned Z as a remnant of Atlantis or a lost Celtic colony, weaving pseudoscience and indigenous lore into a narrative that consumed him. By his final expedition, he'd pared his team down to just 3, himself, his eldest son Jack, and Jack's friend Raleigh Rymel, a deliberate choice he wrote to avoid the treachery of men. Their last known dispatch, sent back with indigenous guides, mentioned venturing into territory even locals feared. Then silence. For decades, Fawcett's fate was a morbid guessing game. Had he been killed by the Kalapalo tribe, as some oral histories suggested? Succumbed to disease or starvation? Or had he, as he'd half-joked in letters, gone native, living out his days as a white-haired prophet in some hidden village? The jungle offered no answers, only rumors. A skeleton with a gold tooth Fawcett's dental work didn't match, a tribe guarding English ghosts, even a secret diary allegedly found in the 1950s, its pages disintegrating upon touch. Then came the 21st century, and with it, a twist no one saw coming. In 2008, satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar revealed something astonishing. Clusters of geometric earthworks across the Bolivian Amazon, not just a few, but hundreds. These weren't random clearings, they were the remnants of causeways, moats, and plaza-like structures spanning over 250 kilometers. Archaeologists dubbed them the Amazonian Stonehenge. Even more startling, some sites dated back to 1200 CE, supporting the once ridiculed idea of a garden city civilization that transformed the rainforest through controlled burns and enriched soils. The clincher arrived in 2020. LiDAR scans in the same region Fawcett had last explored uncovered a sprawling network of ceremonial centers and roads, all hidden beneath centuries of growth. These weren't the gold-plated temples of Fawcett's dreams, but something arguably more valuable proof that the Amazon had hosted urban-scale societies far earlier than Western science believed. Indigenous oral histories, long dismissed as myth, suddenly aligned with the data. Tales of cities of the ancestors now had physical form. Fawcett's tragedy wasn't that he imagined Z, it's that he misjudged its nature. The real lost cities of the Amazon weren't alien outposts or Atlantean colonies. They were homegrown marvels of agro-engineering, built by cultures that mastered their environment without destroying it. The jungle hadn't erased them, it had absorbed them, repurposing their mounds and canals into the very fabric of the forest. In the end, Fawcett's greatest error might have been his refusal to see what was right in front of him. A civilization so seamlessly integrated with nature, it took us a century of technology to recognize it as civilization at all. His skeleton may never be found, but his legacy endures. A cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession and a testament to the Amazon's endless capacity to surprise. What if history isn't a straight line, but a spiral, a series of echoes where civilizations rise, vanish, and whisper back to us across centuries? These lost cities aren't just rubble and ruins, they're portals to moments when humanity dared to dream bigger than the horizon. From the jungle-choked pyramids of Tikal to the drowned temples of Thonis-Heracleion, each rediscovery rewrites the story we thought we knew. Imagine the thrill of an archaeologist brushing sand from a forgotten inscription, or a diver's flashlight piercing the gloom to reveal a statue that hasn't seen light in millennia. These aren't just academic victories, they're reminders that our past is far stranger, richer, and more interconnected than textbooks ever let on. Think about what these places represent. Machu Picchu proves that genius can flourish atop mountains, while Çatalhöyük whispers that equality might be humanity's oldest experiment. Babylon's fall warns of hubris, and Cahokia's mounds challenge every assumption about pre-Columbian America. But the real magic lies in the gaps, the mysteries we haven't solved yet. Will we ever decipher the Indus Valley script? Does Atlantis sleep beneath Santorini's ash, or was it never more than Plato's parable? The unanswered questions aren't failures, they're invitations. Every broken wall and half-buried artifact is a puzzle piece waiting for its match, a story paused mid-sentence. This is why we keep searching. It's not just about treasure or glory, it's about resonance. When we stand in these ruins, we're touching the same stones as someone from 1,000 years ago, someone who laughed, loved, and wondered about their place in the universe just like we do. Their cities fell, but their questions endure. What does it mean to build something lasting? How do we balance ambition with humility? The answers might lie in the next buried temple, the next sunken ship, the next scrap of parchment waiting to be read. So tell me, which of these lost cities captivates you the most? Is it the golden enigma of El Dorado or the cosmic precision of Teotihuacán? Maybe you've got a theory about the Hanging Gardens or a hunch about what really happened to Percy Fawcett. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep the conversation alive, because history isn't just something we dig up, it's something we remake together with every new discovery and every shared wonder. The past isn't finished, it's just waiting for us to listen.